Cool autumn light slipped through the tall panes at Northbridge Dynamics in Boston. It spread a golden sheen across the red carpet in the boardroom. The air carried fresh coffee and the polished oak scent from the long table. Champagne glasses touched with a soft chime, a whisper of success on the way, as polite smiles moved across the faces of the business elite. Ethan Ward sat at the head of the table, his dark blue suit cut close to his steady frame. A silver fountain pen rested ready in his hand. In front of him lay the contract with Argentum Capital, an agreement promising to lift his clean energy company to a new level. Billions of dollars and a brighter name waited for a single signature. Then a gentle click of heels sounded at the door, almost lost in the formal hush. Lena Morales came in, pushing a cleaning cart. Her hair was tied back, and her light gray uniform blended into the walls like a quiet ghost in a glittering world. She dipped her head and emptied a bin with quick, practiced motions. As she leaned near Ethan's chair, her warm breath carried a single warning to his ear. "Don't sign. It's a trap." His fingers froze, the pen a breath above the page. It slipped and tapped the oak, a slight sound that felt like a blast in the still room. Ethan snapped his head around, but Lena was already upright, steering the cart toward the door. Her slim back faded and vanished down the long hall. His heartbeat kicked hard. Confidence burned off like morning fog, and doubt moved in. Why would a janitor dare to challenge an empire? And was that whisper the first wind of a betrayal? One that could turn a 15-year friendship into a knife in the back? Cool autumn light slipped through the tall windows of Northbridge Dynamics in Boston. It spread a golden wash across the long red carpet in the boardroom. The air held fresh coffee and the rich scent of polished oak from the table, where thick folders sat in neat stacks, their metal clips catching the crystal chandelier's glow. Ethan Ward sat at the head of the table, his dark blue suit cut close to his steady frame. A silver fountain pen rested tight in his hand. The contract with Argentum Capital filled his view, promising huge numbers, wide open doors, and a bright future for the clean energy company he had built with sweat. The room swelled with quiet expectation. Champagne glasses met with soft taps, a whisper of success almost within reach. A light click of heels sounded at the door, nearly lost in the formal hush. Lena Morales entered, pushing a cleaning cart. Her hair was tied back, and her pale gray uniform blended into the wall. She dipped her head. "Sorry, I'll just empty the trash." No one answered. Eyes stayed fixed on the pages and on the polite smiles passing between the parties. Lena moved closer. Her thin glove touched the rim of the bin near Ethan's chair. She leaned slightly, the motion as routine as any other night, but her warm breath skimmed his ear. Her voice was barely more than a draft through a door. "Don't sign. It's a trap." Ethan's fingers stopped. The pen hovered a fraction of an inch above the page, then slipped and clicked against the wood, rolling a little. He snapped his head toward her, but Lena had already straightened. Resolve flashed in her eyes before she lowered them. She pushed the cart out, her slim back fading into the dim light of the long hall. He drew a breath, throat dry. His gaze swept the room and landed on Victor Hale, his friend of 15 years, his co-founder, wearing a tight smile with pressed lips. The Argentum representative lifted an eyebrow and tapped a finger on the table. "Just sign, Ethan." Victor kept his tone light, but the way he gripped his glass was tight with strain. "We're ready." "Give me 5 minutes," Ethan said. He stood so fast the chair scraped across the floor. The room fell silent, the air turning heavy, like storm clouds rolling in. "Is something wrong?" Victor tilted his head. His eyes narrowed, worry breaking through. "I need to handle something," Ethan said, already moving for the door. The Argentum rep stepped in, voice rising. Ethan, every term has been reviewed. I said 5 minutes. His voice cut clean as a blade. The door thudded shut behind him. Doubtful glances met in his wake, and whispers rose like a shaken hive. A soft blue carpet ran down the hallway toward a small break room. Lena pushed the cart slowly, wheels skimming the floor, but the fast footsteps behind her made her stop. Ethan reached her, breath quick. Come with me. Now his tone left no room to refuse. Lena hesitated, hands tightening on the handle, then nodded. They stepped into the break room. The door clicked shut. Ethan folded his arms and leaned against the wall, eyes fixed on her, as if he could read the truth there. Explain, now, and convince me you're not out of your mind for cutting into the most important signing of my life. Lena clenched the trash bag, drew a steadying breath, and lifted her chin. I know this sounds crazy, but I've heard conversations no one else knows about. They're setting you up. Who is they? His voice dropped, heavy with doubt, and he took a step closer. Argentum. And Mr. Victor. Her voice trembled, but her gaze didn't waver. That contract hides a clause. Once you sign, the assets and control shift out of your hands. Ethan stared at her. Part of him wanted to laugh it off. Another part felt a cold line of ice run down his spine. He shook his head, trying to steady himself. What's your name? Lena Morales. I've worked here for 8 months. Night shift. If you're making this up, or you're looking for attention, you're fired. Fine. Her answer was quick. She let the trash bag drop to the floor. But if I stay quiet and you lose everything, I'll never forgive myself. Their eyes held in a beat of silence. A man used to big decisions, and a woman ready to risk everything for a whispered warning. Ethan stepped back and dragged a hand over his face, hiding the churn inside. Do you have proof? Yes. Photos, recordings, documents. I'll show you. Tonight, 7 o'clock. Here. Ethan nodded slowly and motioned for her to go. When the door closed, he stayed in the narrow room, forehead against the cool glass, looking out at Boston pulsing below. His fist tightened, his breathing eased. Out there, the contract still lay on the boardroom table, waiting for his pen. But for the first time in his long career, he honestly hesitated. Doubt slid in like a shadow stretching under autumn sun. Was that whisper the hard truth, or just a passing breeze strong enough to flip his world? Dusk settled over Boston as sunset poured through the tall windows of North Bridge Dynamics, washing the top-floor lobby in a sea of fading fire. Ethan Ward walked into the boardroom with heavier steps than usual, the contract tucked under his arm, the morning's whisper still clinging to him. Every eye swung his way. Victor Hale leaned forward, a smile trying to pull Ethan back into the old rhythm. Everything okay? Victor's voice carried a flick of impatience. His fingers tapped the glossy wood. Ethan glanced toward the door, where Lena Morales had vanished that morning, then down at the papers. Actually, I want to review a few clauses. A small wave of surprise moved around the table. Chairs shifted. The Argentum representative frowned and tightened his grip on a water glass, but Ethan didn't stop. He slid the contract into a black leather briefcase and snapped it shut. We'll sign tomorrow. The room sagged into a hush. Only the faint clink of glass sounded, like uneasy whispers. Victor nodded, but his eyes narrowed, a bowstring pulled to its limit. Ethan felt it, the spark that could set off a chain reaction. A strange mix of risk and warning pressed into his chest. At 7 o'clock, the small break room on the 18th floor glowed with warm yellow light. Outside, the city lights spread like a giant star map. Ethan had arrived 5 minutes early, back to the window, thumb tracing the rim of a cold coffee cup. The door eased open. Lena stepped in with a worn canvas bag over her shoulder, eyes sweeping the room as if checking for hidden corners. She set the bag on a small wooden table and pulled out a phone and a stack of color prints, their corners softly creased. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning Victor's office and heard him talking in the next room, she said. Her tone was even, but her fingers gripped the bag's edge. With the same woman, Camille Royce. Ethan took the first photo, shot through a narrow crack in a door. Camille wore a fitted black dress, leaning toward Victor with a smile sharp as a honed blade. Paper rustled in his hand. Lena tapped her phone and played a recording. Victor's voice came clean and sure, each word cutting the quiet. As soon as he signs, everything moves to Argentum Global Holdings. He'll have nothing but debt, Camille answered with a soft laugh. Ethan's always too trusting. Ethan eased back in his chair, as if a cold hand closed around his heart. His breath grew heavy. He shook his head, fighting the shock. Anything else? Lena slid photos of the contract across to him. The version you saw and the one they'll execute aren't the same. In the real one, you're left with 20%. He flipped pages fast. Tiny lines waited like traps, printed to slip past a rushed read. The pieces locked together too neatly to be chance. A slow anger rose in him. And this. Lena pushed over a bank transfer image and pointed at the red number. $15 million moved from Argentum to Victor's personal account last week. Ethan went still. He set the photo down with a soft thud and looked straight at her. Why tell me? You know this could cost you everything. I'll lose more if I stay quiet, she said, hands clasped tight. I'll lose myself. A knock startled them both. Ethan cracked the door. A security guard peeked in, his cap brim shadowing half his face. Sorry, Mr. Ward. Mr. Hale's looking for you. Emergency meeting in the auditorium. Ethan nodded and closed the door. He turned to Lena. Go now. Stay safe. Don't let anyone know you met me. She nodded, packed fast, and left him a copy sealed in a brown envelope. Their eyes met for a breath, a quiet promise, and a warning for whatever came next. The 10th floor auditorium was packed. Cold white light washed over worried faces crammed onto folding chairs. When Ethan walked in, the air felt tight, the hush before a storm. Victor stood at the lectern, mic gripped hard, his voice ringing through the speakers. Today I have to report a serious breach. We've identified who photographed confidential documents. Ethan stopped in the aisle, heart pounding. Victor pointed toward the back, his voice turning hard. Lena Morales. A wave rolled through the room, chairs scraped, whispers spread. Lena stood at the end of a row, chin high, hands loose at her sides. She didn't shake. Ethan felt eyes slide toward him, waiting. The air thickened. We'll terminate her immediately to protect the company, Victor said, in all authority. The room seemed to shrink until only he and Lena remained. This second trap moved faster and cut deeper than he'd imagined. 2 guards escorted her out. She kept her back straight and didn't bend under the stairs. As she passed the front row, her eyes caught his for a single beat. No words, just the message he understood. Don't let them win. The door boomed shut. Victor stepped down with a thin, satisfied smile, like a piece set just right on a board. Ethan tightened the file Lena had given him. Paper crackled under his fingers. His anger hardened into steel. But could he move fast enough before the next trap snapped shut? Victor Hale stood close beside Ethan Ward, his breath heavy in the stale air of the just-cleared auditorium, where talk still drifted like lingering smoke. Ethan clenched the file in his hand. Paper crackled under his thumb. Anger from Lena's public accusations still burned low. You should think hard before you make yourself the next target. Victor's voice was low and weighted. He straightened his tie with slow care, fabric whispering. Ethan didn't answer. He stood still and felt each word land like a judge's gavel inside his head. Victor turned and walked away, his tall frame folding into the stream of employees leaving the room, and the feeling of isolation closed in. Ethan slid Lena's documents into a black leather case and stepped out. Whispers followed him. Some people stared with doubt. Others dropped their eyes and moved aside, as if he'd become suspect. The isolation tightened. Victor had planted the seed. In the elevator to the 20th floor, Ethan texted Lena, "Where are you?" No reply. He called. The phone rang 4 times, then cut off. The long tone echoed in the small car. He gripped the phone. His chest felt heavier. His office lights clicked on as he entered. A thick envelope sat in the center of his glossy desk, no sender listed. He opened it, hands unsteady. Inside were crisp color photos. He and Lena in the break room at 7 o'clock, a close shot of documents changing hands under warm light. Another of them walking together in the hall, their eyes locked like a silent exchange. On the bottom lay a sheet of sharp, slanted handwriting. Looks like betraying the company, doesn't it? Ethan squeezed the photos until the corners bent. It was clear. Victor wasn't only trapping Lena. He'd started spinning a web for Ethan, tight and patient. Late afternoon light slipped through the blinds. Ethan called in his trusted aide, Mason Clark, and shut the door. Mason stood with a small notebook in hand. "Mason, I need copies of every hallway camera on 18 and 20 from yesterday through today. Don't alert security." Mason's brow pinched. His finger tapped the notebook. "You know security reports straight to Victor, right?" "I know," Ethan said, keeping his voice even. He leaned back in the leather chair and stared out at Boston sinking into dusk. "That's why I need you." Mason nodded and left at a quick clip, but returned 10 minutes later, face tight, sweat beading on his forehead. "The server room lock code's been changed. Only Victor and senior IT have access." Ethan sank back, hand to his face. Victor was erasing the trail, faster than he'd expected. That evening, Ethan drove out of downtown to a small cafe Lena had mentioned. Neon spread across the wet street. He chose a corner table with a clear view of the door. Rain traced soft lines down the front window, silver under the warm lights. Near 8, Lena stepped in wearing a gray hoodie, the hood low. Rain clung to her shoulders. She sat across from him, eyes sweeping the room for unfamiliar faces. "You shouldn't contact me right now," she said quietly, fingers tied on the hot cup. "They're watching you." "Maybe me too. You disappeared all day. I was worried. I had to wipe my tracks and stash the files somewhere safe." She pulled a small USB from her pocket and slid it across the scarred wooden table. "The originals are on this, audio and images, but you need to understand. If you keep it, you'll become their next target." Ethan stared at the USB. Its metal caught the cafe's light with a cold glint. He understood. It wasn't just evidence. In the wrong hands, it could set everything on fire. They left as the rain grew heavier. A black SUV sat across the street at an angle, lights off, windows dark. Lena saw it and stiffened. "Take the long way," she said, tugging him into a narrow alley. Their steps quickened on the slick brick. Far behind, an engine turned over. Tires squealed on wet pavement. A chill ran down his spine. It wasn't the rain. It was the feeling of being hunted, close and honest. At Ethan's car, parked at the alley's end, he popped the trunk and grabbed a dry coat for Lena. Rain dripped from the eaves onto the car roof. "We need a plan," he said, wiping water from his face. Not just to protect you, but to strike back. Lena met his eyes, rain caught on her lashes. Are you ready if that means risking your position and your name? He paused. Rain drummed on the roof like a clock, counting down. If I don't, I lose everything, me included. On the drive back, his phone vibrated. The screen lit the dark cabin. A text from an unknown number read, 9 a.m. tomorrow, boardroom, 25th floor. Come alone. Otherwise, the USB is useless. Ethan checked the rear view. Boston's neon still glowed, but it felt like he'd stepped deeper into Victor's maze, where every turn could be a trap, and the exit kept fading away. Night seeped into Boston's narrow streets, but the warm lights in Ethan Ward's living room burned on. A phone sat in the middle of the glass table, its anonymous message coiled there like a snake. 9 a.m. tomorrow, 25th floor. Come alone. He tried calling the number back. A flat system tone said it didn't exist, the sound echoing in the quiet room. Ethan stood, rubbed his face, and stared out at the dark city. His breath felt heavier. Morning rain drummed on his windshield, a restless beat on the drive to Northbridge Dynamics. His heart kept a steady rhythm, but deep down it felt like he was heading into surgery, both the surgeon and the one on the table. The elevator hummed up to the 25th floor. It opened onto a gray carpeted hall washed in cold LED light. Glass panels reflected his lone figure. At the end, a boardroom door stood slightly ajar. No sound came from inside. He stepped in. No one waited. A white envelope sat on the long wooden table beside a steaming cup of coffee. Ethan moved closer, touched the envelope, and opened it. 3 quickly printed photos slid out. Victor handing a thick file to a stranger. Camille Royce at a bank counter, her face carefully composed, and an internal schedule stamped confidential, titled, Closed meeting with Argentum, 11 a.m. today. A sharp hand had written in one corner, If you want to keep the company, come. Don't tell anyone. A soft sound behind him made him turn, photos gripped tight. The door had clicked shut. A small woman stepped from a dim corner, long coat brushing the floor, hat shadowing half her face. When she lifted her chin, he knew her. Clara Finch, the former head of legal who'd left after a quiet dispute with Victor. She looked slimmer in the low light. You're more cautious than I expected, she said, sliding into a chair opposite him. I left that for you. What do you want from me? Ethan set the photos down with a soft thud. Suspicion rose in his chest. I want you to survive, she said, fingers tightening on the strap of a worn leather bag. And I want Victor to face consequences. I have part of the evidence, but I can't go public. If I show my face, they'll take me down in a day. Why should I trust you? His palm felt cold against the polished wood. Clara tilted her head, a bitter half-smile touching her mouth. Because you don't have anyone else. She babbled, her voice steady, as her hands trembled as she opened a small notebook. After leaving the company, she'd tracked transactions tied to Victor and Camille. 3 weeks ago, she discovered a series of transfers into a Cyprus-based fund that matched the reported merger amounts, numbers so striking they kept her awake at night. She downloaded everything but hit a final password wall. She believed only Ethan had full access. You can unlock it, she said, pushing the notebook to him. But you have to get into the internal data room, today, before Victor locks the system for good. Ethan checked the wall clock, 10:12 a.m. If she was right, he had less than an hour before the Argentum meeting. Time slid like sand through his fingers. He left the 25th floor. The elevator drifted down to the data level. 2 security guards stood at a steel door, eyes cold as glass. hands resting at their belts. Ethan swiped his CEO badge. The reader chirped. The heavy door swung open. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Server rows hummed like a hive. He found the central station in the corner and logged in with the highest credentials. An Argentum directory blinked on screen, wrapped in dual password protection under the harsh fluorescent lights. He typed a long string. His pulse climbed. Sweat beaded his brow. The screen flashed, then opened a flood. Detailed transfer ledgers, hidden contract drafts, and emails between Victor and a lawyer in Zurich about forcing the CEO out. Each line is cut into a trust that is already cracked. Ethan slid Lena's USB into the port. He started a full copy. The progress bar crawled forward. At 85%, a female voice broke through the speakers, sharp and calm. "Mr. Ward, please report to the 21st floor. Emergency meeting." He yanked the USB, slipped it into his inner pocket, and shut the station down, hands unsteady. In the hall, Mason waited by the elevator, worry clear on his face and phone clenched in his fist. "Victor's looking for you. Urgent." On the way up, Ethan's thoughts raced. Clara's warning, the files he'd pulled. She might be a faithful ally. She might be Victor's test. Every detail felt like a tangled piece on a board. The doors slid open on 21. Victor stood there, smile thin as a blade. His hand landed lightly on Ethan's shoulder, firm as a clamp. "We need to talk, Ethan." Victor Hale kept a firm grip on Ethan Ward's shoulder. Cool mint on his breath cut the fluorescent hallway on the 21st floor, where the light threw long, warped shadows. Ethan kept his face calm, though his heart pounded hard. Their private talk felt like a blade hanging overhead. "You just went somewhere you shouldn't," Victor whispered, low enough for only two. His fingers tightened. "And now? I want to know who sent you there." "If I tell you, what then?" Ethan said, steady. "Thank me for saving you a few minutes." Victor's smile never touched his eyes. He stepped back half a pace, but still blocked the way. "That depends on your answer, or on your silence." They moved into the 21st floor conference room. The air felt thick as smoke. Glass doors were sealed. Half-drawn blinds cut the daylight into long, knife-like bands across the table. Camille Royce sat at the head, tapping the glossy wood with bright red nails. "Hello, Ethan," she said, voice smooth with hidden points. "I hear you were very busy this morning." Ethan took a seat. His briefcase clicked as he set it down. "Busy is the job for a CEO. And you two, ready for Argentum?" "Drop the act," Victor snapped, leaning in until the wood creaked. "I know you copied the data. The only question is, what do you plan to do with it?" "Protect this company from the people eating it from the inside," Ethan said. His fingers tightened under the table. Camille tilted her head. The temperature in her eyes fell. "If you think that evidence gives you leverage, remember evidence can disappear. Witnesses are even easier." Victor began a slow circle, a hunter marking ground. His shoes thudded dully on the carpet. "I'll give you one chance," he said, stopping behind Ethan. "Hand me the USB, right now." Then it's as if nothing ever happened. "Nothing?" Ethan leaned back, arms crossed. "Not the illegal transfers, the swapped contracts, the plan to push me out?" Victor lowered his voice at Ethan's ear, words like a hidden cut. "Including Lena Morales. Staying safe." Ethan's knuckles went white, but he kept his face flat. If he flinched, Victor would find Lena and the files. Camille watched the tiny muscles in his jaw and let out a soft, ringing laugh. "You think you have the upper hand," she said. "You forget we're several moves ahead. The 11 o'clock with Argentum seals it. After that, you won't have a voice. Time tightened like a noose. Ethan had to get out before they boxed him into a fake deal or a legal trap. He stood, lifted his case, and squared his shoulders. If we're done, I have work to do for the meeting. See you in the boardroom. Victor didn't stop him. A thin smile slid across his face, bright as a blade. See you, Ethan. And don't make me come find you again. Ethan left the floor and rushed to his office. The hallway felt endless. He opened the hidden safe behind the wall art and checked the USB. The metal was cold against his fingers. The sense of eyes on his back would not fade. He decided to send an encrypted copy to a mailbox outside the company's systems. Keys rattled across the laptop. The screen flickered. The network cut. A red banner snapped up. Access temporarily locked for security. Contact IT. The side door swung open. Mason Clark slipped in, face tight, a packet of papers in his hand. They're freezing your accounts. Victor's calling it an emergency security move. The desk phone rang, slicing the room. Ethan picked up. Clara Finch was on the line, urgent but controlled. They know you copied the data. If you're not out of the building in 10 minutes, you won't keep it. Ethan looked at Mason and pressed a finger to his lips. Understood, he said into the phone, then hung up. He pushed the USB deeper into his inner pocket. Fabric met skin, ice cold. They took the stairs to the lower level and slid into a cluster of staff moving clean energy demo units. Carts rattled loud enough to cover their steps. The air downstairs was damp, metallic, and dusty. Near the garage, 2 security guards stepped in front of them. One moved closer, hand resting at his belt, tone firm and official. Sorry, Mr. Ward. We need to check your bag and personal items at the order of Mr. Hale. Ethan and Mason traded a quick look. His heart hammered. If they searched him, it was over. The USB burned in his pocket like a live charge. Could he slip past without a spark? Or would this final trap snap shut? 2 guards blocked the exit to the underground garage, shoulders wide as steel doors. One kept a radio in his hand. The other spoke in a flat, official tone. Ethan Ward set his briefcase on the cold concrete, but his hand stayed tight on the handle, knuckles straining. The threat of a search hung over him like a noose. Sorry, Mr. Ward. Emergency inspection. Mr. Hale ordered us to seize all devices and documents for security. Ethan glanced at Mason Clark. His aide understood at once. Mason drew a breath, then, accidentally, dropped a thick file to the floor. Papers scattered like autumn leaves. Both guards bent to grab them, oversized frames folding down and opening a narrow lane. Ethan didn't wait a heartbeat. He spun, yanked the nearby emergency door, and the alarm screamed to life, sharp and piercing, filling the dark garage like a wail. The stairwell was tight and dim, lit only by red emergency strobes that pulsed like blood. Behind him, boots pounded, shouts mixed with the alarm. Ethan hugged the briefcase to his chest and took the steps 4 at a time. His heart hammered, his lungs burned. His breath turned to white clouds in the cold air. A secondary basement opened onto a heavy steel door leading to the loading bay. He shoved through. Cold wind and the bite of gasoline hit his face. Rain drummed on the metal above. A box truck was backing in, its beeper shrieking and smothering the alarm's echo. He slipped through the tight gap between the truck's tail and a rough concrete wall. The scrape nicked his hand, but he didn't stop. He slid into the alley's deep shadow. Voices from the guards thinned in the distance, lost under engines and rain rattling on old tin. His phone buzzed hard in his pocket. He answered, still breathing fast. Clara Finch's voice cut in, urgent, sharp. I figured it out. You got blocked at the garage. You need to clear the area now. They'll lock down the perimeter in 5 minutes. Ethan moved toward the alley mouth, where a streetlight flickered through the rain. Cold water ran from the awning into his collar. I've got the USB, but they know I grabbed something. I can't keep it on me. Give it to me, Clara said. Her voice was steady, with a thin tremor under it. There's an old copy shop near the Greenway. The owners are with me. Put the USB in the envelope he gives you, then walk out. Don't look back. He crossed 2 low buildings and stepped into a small shop with a weathered sign. Inside, neon flickered like it might go dark any second. A middle-aged man looked up from a scarred wooden counter and gave a slight nod, as if he'd been waiting. He handed Ethan a brown envelope. Ethan hesitated a beat, then let it go. The man locked it in a small safe behind the counter with a dry click. Back on the sidewalk, the rain turned heavy, splashing into the collar of Ethan's soaked vest and chilling his skin. He started toward a nearby lot, but a black sedan glided in from the far end of the block. Headlights sliced the rain like a scythe, lighting the slick puddles. Through the fogged windshield, he caught a glimpse of Camille Royce in the passenger seat. Her mouth tipped into a knowing smile, like she'd mapped his steps. The car eased to the curb. The window lowered slowly. Rain beaded along the glass edge. Running in the rain doesn't suit you, Ethan, she said. Get in. We need to talk, before Victor talks for you. Ethan stood in the rain, water sliding from his hair to his shoulders. I don't think we have anything left to discuss. Camille laughed softly, the sound mixing with rain on the roof. Oh, we do. I know the USB isn't on you, and I know who has it. The problem is, if Victor finds out before I speak, Clara Finch disappears. The words hit like a blade. Ethan's hand clenched around the empty briefcase strap, rain tracking over white knuckles. He didn't answer. He watched Camille, trying to measure truth against bluff, while the downpour kept falling hard. The sedan rolled forward as he walked, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Camille called after him through the open window. Haven't you learned yet? In this game, you're not only protecting yourself, you're protecting the people who've staked their lives on you. Ethan stopped in the cold rain, fingers tightening on the briefcase strap. Water soaked through his jacket and set a tremor in his body. The storm couldn't wash away the question drilling into his mind. Was Clara truly safe? Or had he just pulled her into a deadly crosshairs? Rain hammered the street like a steady drum, yet the space Camille Royce left behind seemed to swallow every other sound. Ethan Ward stood still under the cold downpour, water running from his hair into his collar. His heart pounded as if he'd sprinted a mile. Her warning about Clara kept echoing. Camille had vanished with the black sedan, but her words clung to him like nightfall. He didn't fully believe her, yet he couldn't ignore her either. In this game, one slow move could cost a life. His grip tightened on the empty briefcase strap. He headed toward the city center, passing blocks washed in dim gold light. He pulled out his soaked phone and called Clara. 3 long rings. No answer. The silence felt like danger, whispering close. He tried again. Still nothing. A colder chill, not from the rain, ran his spine. He stepped under a closed shop's awning. He sent a short text. Don't call back. If you see this, send the safe signal. The screen stayed dark under the beads of rain. He scrolled to Lena Morales, then stopped. If they were tracking him, reaching out to Lena would paint a target on her back. Instead, he called Mason Clark. Mason picked up at once, voice low. Where are you? Victor's furious. You're not at the office. He just cut my access. I need a car not tied to the company. Fast, Ethan said, rain thudding overhead. And set a safe location. I have to check on Clara before they do. 15 minutes later, A beat-up hatchback rolled to the curb, headlights dull in the rain. Mason sat at the wheel, hood up, half his face in shadow. Ethan slid into the passenger seat. Water dripped onto the floor. "Where first?" Mason asked, hands tight on the wheel, eyes on the mirror. "Clara's place." "Don't park out front. We watch from a distance." Clara Finch's building sat on a quiet South Boston corner, 3 stories with rusted iron balconies. Curtains were drawn tight. Mason parked down the block behind bare trees. Fallen leaves mixed with rain hid them. Ethan lifted a small pair of binoculars. They fogged with his breath. Clara's second-floor door stayed shut. No lights. The lot out front was empty, only puddles shining. Across the street, a black SUV idled without lights, windows dark, engine purring like a warning. "See anything?" Mason whispered, keys clenched in his fist. "Victor's people," Ethan said, lowering the binoculars. "They're waiting. She might still be inside, or they beat us here." A detail surfaced in his mind. A rear fire exit that dropped into a narrow alley no one noticed. He and Mason left the car, looping behind the low buildings. Rain splashed under their shoes. The roof tin rattled, masking their steps. As they neared the back stairs, Clara's apartment light flicked on, then off, fast, like a flare. A shadow moved across the window. Ethan motioned Mason to hold. He pressed to the wet brick and eased to the base of the metal stairs, breath quick. The alley door creaked. Clara slipped out in a gray hooded coat, a canvas bag wedged under her arm, rain shining on her shoulders. Her eyes widened when she saw him. He raised a finger for silence and pointed toward the hatchback under the trees. Clara nodded and moved, the bag rustling. A man's voice cut through the rain from the alley mouth. "Clara Finch." 2 figures broke from the SUV, heavy steps pounding on wet pavement. Ethan pulled Clara against the cold wall and shielded her with his body. They edged toward the car. Rain soaked through his jacket and stung his skin. Mason fired the engine. Tires kicked water across the street. The growl of the hatchback drowned the shouts behind them. Ethan and Clara dove into the back seat. The door slammed. The car lunged forward. The black SUV screamed after them, headlights hunting through the rain. Mason cut through 2 tight intersections, the hatchback leaning hard. The engine behind them stayed close, louder every block. Clara's breathing came fast. Her eyes never left the bag on her lap. Her hands clutched the strap until her knuckles went white. Ethan glanced down. The strap had split at one corner, exposing a thick stack of files and a small aluminum-wrapped hard drive catching the streetlight. "What is it?" he asked over the road noise. "Extra evidence," Clara said, voice shaking but steady. "Original transfer ledgers. If Victor gets them, everything ends here." The SUV surged, closing the gap. Its horn blared. Mason threaded the hatchback through a narrow lane, tires hissing on the slick asphalt. Ethan leaned toward Clara, voice low in the chaos. "If they force us to stop, are you ready for me to draw them off?" Clara looked straight at him, unblinking, fingers still locked on the bag. "As long as this data doesn't land in their hands." Brakes screamed through the thick rain. The hatchback shuddered as Mason locked his grip on the wheel, tires sliding across the soaked pavement. Camille's earlier threat still cinched around them, like an invisible rope. In the mirror, a black SUV closed fast, its spray snapping like silver whips in the heavy air. A box truck blocked the lane ahead like a steel wall. Headlights rippled across standing water. No room to reverse, no time to turn. Clara Finch hugged the canvas bag tight. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed hard. "We're boxed in," Mason said, teeth set, his voice buried under the drumming rain. The SUV edged up on the left. A passenger door clicked open. A broad man in a rain shell stepped out, moving with slow, certain weight. He rapped the glass, hard enough to cut through the storm. "Out of the car," he ordered, flat as a verdict. Ethan glanced right. A narrow gap yawned between the truck's tail and a cracked curb. They could make it if they risked it, but the angle was brutal and the roadway slick as oil. He gripped the door pull, chest tight with fear and resolve. "There isn't a safe option," he said, eyes on that sliver of space. Outside, the man raised a hand toward the SUV in a quiet command. A rear door opened. Ethan caught a glimpse of Camille Royce in the back, features blurred by rain, a faint cut of a smile on her lips. She leaned forward, her voice threading through the patter. "Don't let it end here, Ethan. Give me the bag, and we all walk away." Clara's fingers cinched the strap. She said nothing. Ethan looked to her. A slight shake of her head said everything. No handoff, no deal. "Say the word," Mason said, breath tight. "I'll cut the wheel." Ethan gave a quick nod. In one beat, he yanked his belt snug, braced a hand on the grab bar, and pulled Clara close with the other. "Hold on." Mason punched the gas, drifted a foot for runway, then cranked right. Tires shrieked, metal screeched. The hatchback leaned and knifed through the gap, the mirror missing the truck by inches. The SUV roared, but the truck pinched its path. It had to back and swing wide, the engine snarling against the rain. The hatchback shot into a narrow side street, streetlights spattering gold across the wet windshield and their tense faces. Ethan checked the mirror. No SUV in sight, but a distant growl told him they hadn't quit, only lost the trail. Clara opened the bag and pulled a small aluminum-wrapped drive, hands trembling. "We have to get this off me and you," she said. "They only need one of us." "Somewhere close?" Ethan asked, voice steadying as the car gained speed. Mason nodded, eyes forward. "An old warehouse by the harbor. I used it for test shipments. No one goes there now. Rain hit harder at the harbor. Wind knifed in off the water, sharp with salt and rust." Mason cut the engine beside a brick warehouse with a blistered steel door. They ran inside. Cold air turned their breath white. The damp concrete squelched underfoot. Clara slid the hard drive into an empty metal crate in a dark corner and pulled a dusty tarp over it. She wiped rain and sweat from her brow. "If I disappear, at least it stays here." Ethan stood near the bent door, scanning the lot through a narrow seam. River air rushed in, cold enough to bite. Headlights flickered far off, a car easing closer, scything the rain. "We're being tailed," he said, body tensing. Clara gripped his shoulder, her fingers cold against his soaked jacket. "If they take me, don't interfere. Get the evidence out." He started to argue, then swallowed the words. Her look didn't leave room for debate. The car stopped a few dozen yards away, its lights cut out. Silence dropped, heavy and final, leaving only rain ticking on the thin tin roof. Would they slip away in time? Or would this warped steel door become the last trap? Victor Hale's voice slipped through the warehouse door, sharp as a blade across the damp dark. Rain ticked on the tin roof. Wind from the harbor hissed through the gap, carrying salt and rust. Ethan Ward heard his heartbeat pound in his ears like war drums. Victor called again, his tone low under the rain. "Ethan, last chance. Come out, bring Clara, or I come in and take her." Clara Finch pressed against the mildewed brick, knuckles white on the torn canvas strap. Her eyes locked on Ethan. Her breath rose and fell beneath the soaked hood. Ethan stepped into a shadowed corner, pulled out his phone, switched it on with a shaking thumb, and tucked it deep in his chest pocket, fabric cold against his skin. He kept his voice low, eyes on the door. "Stay quiet." When I signal, run straight to the back." Clara started to protest, then shut her mouth tight. No turning back now. Rain dripped from the eaves and covered their whispers. Hinges screamed. Heavy steps thudded in, stomping through puddles, each one like a nail driven into a coffin. The outer storm seemed to fall away. The door burst wide. A flashlight carved the dark, slow and searching, then stopped on Ethan's face, lighting rain on his cheek. Victor walked in first, long coat dragging, soaked to the hem. Two big guards followed like steel posts, their shadows stretching under the beam. "You disappoint me," Victor said, a smile thin and cold as ground steel. He stopped at the center, water tapping the floor. "I wanted a clean finish. You chose the hard way." Ethan held his stare, chest tight, lungs fighting for air. "The only clean finish is you in an interview room." Victor laughed once, the sound echoing with the wind. Confident. "But you still don't get it. Real power isn't the truth. It's who controls the story." The beam slid to Clara and the bag in her grip. One guard moved up, his bulk blocking the light. "Where's the drive?" Ethan shifted, putting himself between them. The air thickened. All he heard was 3 sets of rough breathing in the cramped space. Victor eased closer, slow as a cat toying with a mouse, eyes half-hooded under the strobe of the beam. "Hand it over," he said, "and she keeps breathing." The point of no return snapped into place. Ethan drew a sharp breath. "You want it?" "Come get it." He slammed a metal bin. The crash rang off the walls. The tarp flew back. The hard drive flashed silver under the light. A guard lunged. Ethan kicked the bin's edge. The drive skipped across the concrete toward Clara, clacking as it rolled. "Grab it!" Clara scooped it and bolted for the back door, the bag's rustle masking the rain. The second guard yanked his radio. "Block the rear." Victor's cold smile broke. His face twisted. "Take them both." The guards split. Rubber soles scraped on a wet floor. Ethan met the first one head-on. The hit felt like a wall of concrete. The flashlight skittered and spun, strobing shards of metal on the ground. Ethan ducked low, drove his shoulder into the man's gut, and shoved him into a rotten shelf. Wood popped and fell in splinters. In that beat, Clara forced the back door, vanished into the downpour, her outline fading. The other guard wheeled and charged. Ethan snatched the dropped flashlight and hurled it at his face. The crack sent the man stumbling, hands to his eyes, just enough for Ethan to break for the main door. Wind knifed his skin, rain blasted him. Victor blocked the exit, coat snapping in the harbor gusts. Distant streetlight washed his face into a dark mask, anger burning in his eyes. "You just signed your own death warrant," he said, quiet enough to cut through the rain. Ethan walked straight at him, shoulders set, water running down his spine. "No, you just gave me everything I need." Victor's brow knotted. Ethan tapped his chest pocket. "Recording. Every threat you made is saved. And Clara, she's a few blocks away, with the drive." Rage flared in Victor's eyes. His fist clenched, rain beating across his hand. He started forward, but sirens wailed nearby, growing fast. Red and blue flashed in the puddles. Victor stopped dead and snapped a signal to the remaining guard. "Fall back." In an instant, he vanished into the sheets of rain, his tall frame swallowed by the harbor's dark. Ethan stood alone, breath burning hot, a shiver running through his drenched suit. The sirens closed in. Lights swept the warehouse. A small figure broke from the rear alley, soaked head to toe, still gripping the canvas bag. Clara ran to him, breathing hard, eyes bright with relief and caution. Were those patrol cars a rescue, or just the next layer of Victor's trap? A strange voice rose from the dark and made Clara Finch stop in the driving rain. Her step faltered as sirens echoed far off, red and blue rippling in the puddles. Ethan Ward pulled her back into the warehouse's shadow, eyes sweeping the space behind them. His heart punched hard beneath his soaked vest. A tall, thin man stepped out of the wet alley, a black raincoat sweeping the ground, hood pulled low. Streetlight skimmed his sharp face. His eyes shone cold, like broken glass. Two more men slid in beside him, one sweeping a flashlight, the other with a hand buried in a pocket that bulged worryingly. Rain dripped off their hoods onto the concrete. "We've waited a long time for this," the tall man said, voice even and unhurried. He took one step forward. "That drive belonged to us, before you even knew it existed." Clara clenched her jaw and tightened a fist on the torn canvas strap. Rain soaked the fabric and set a tremor in her arms. "Who are you?" "Doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is you hand it over now, or we take it the hard way." Ethan backed a step and put Clara behind him. His body drew tight, a bowstring ready to snap. Wind knifed in from the harbor and stung their faces. The tall man kept coming, eyes fixed on the hard drive peeking from the bag. The flashlight swept the ground, lighting the glitter of rain on the concrete. Options ricocheted through Ethan's mind. Misdirect them, run, or throw the data to Mason, who was waiting somewhere. But Mason wasn't here, only he and Clara in a maze of shadows. Rain on the roof smothered every other sound. The man on the right pulled his hand from his pocket. Not a gun. A folding knife flashed in the weak light, sharp steel catching the fall of rain. "What's your last move, Ward?" the tall one asked, a thin edge of mockery in his voice. He stopped a few strides away, eyes bright with certainty. "Protect a woman who might not survive, or clutch a pile of files that drags you under too." Ethan locked his jaw. He glanced at Clara, then back at him, anger and resolve settling into place. "Neither. It ends my way." He yanked the bag from Clara, turned half a step, and hurled it toward the black water. The aluminum-wrapped drive spun through the dim streetlight and disappeared into the dense rain. A clean slash cut through the night. Ripples spread across the dark surface. The tall man cursed and bolted for the rail, water flying from his shoes. The other two crowded the edge, flashlights raking the waves. Ethan seized the opening and tugged Clara around. "Go!" They sprinted for the narrow street, their shoes slapped through puddles, the shouts behind them swallowed by the steady downpour. At the corner, Ethan ducked into a sprawling container yard, steel stacks rising into a cold, wet maze. His throat burned. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Clara stayed close, breath pitching white in the air. "What did you just do?" she gasped, wiping rain from her face as they paused behind the container. "The drive isn't gone," he said, scanning for an exit as water ran down his back. It was a blank copy. The real one safe. She stopped short, eyes wide in the thin light slipping through the seams. "You planned this?" He nodded without looking back, listening for boots and the clank of metal. "When Camille talked last night, I knew someone besides Victor would come." I got ready. Footsteps multiplied. 3 dark shapes fanned into the yard, flashlights cutting across the steel walls and painting lines of water. Ethan pulled Clara into the tight slot between 2 towering containers. Cold metal pressed through their clothes. Their breath rose in pale clouds. Light skimmed past their faces, then drifted on, hunting elsewhere. As it faded, he whispered under the patter overhead, "When I signal, run for the water. I'll handle the rest." Clara met his eyes, fear there, and a deep trust, and gave a slight nod, fingers clutching her wet sleeve. The tall man stepped into the center aisle, soaked and unblinking, sweeping his beam in a slow circle. "Ward, I know you're here. Don't waste time hiding. You can't outrun this." Ethan walked out of the shadows with both hands raised, rain dripping from his hair to his shoulders. "You want the data? Come take it." The gap closed to a few yards. The flashlight hit Ethan's face and made him squint. "Go," he barked. Clara burst from the slot and tore toward the far harbor lights, her outline dimming in the rain. The man on the left swung his beam after her, but Ethan slammed into him. They tumbled across the slick concrete. The light clattered away, strobing wildly. The tall man jerked a knife from his coat, steel flashing. Ethan caught his wrist, twisted hard, and wrenched it back. The blade rang on the metal floor. Another man lunged from the right. Ethan shoved the tall one into him. Bodies crashed and tangled. Groans mixed with the hiss of rain. The tall man ripped free and stumbled back, fury sparking in his eyes. "We're not done, Ward." They melted into the thick rain, shapes fading between the containers. Ethan stayed on his knees, pulling breath into burning lungs, pain firing along his ribs. Then he saw Clara at the far end, the empty canvas bag still in her hands, waiting under a weak street lamp. Would those strangers return, or was this only the first layer of Victor's deeper trap? Headlights sliced the rain like a bright knife, cutting the storm in two. Clara Finch's shadow vanished toward the harbor's dark, and the image stuck with Ethan Ward. He stood still in glittering puddles. Camille Royce stepped from the black car. Her heels cracked against the wet street, each strike echoing in the heavy air. She straightened, arms folded, a calm smile fixed in place. Her eyes burned with satisfaction under the hazy beams. Clara faltered mid-run, breath breaking into white clouds in the cold. Ethan moved to charge forward, but Camille took a longer step and lifted a hand to stop him. From the shadows on either side, two figures appeared and closed on Clara, their broad frames swallowing the streetlight. "Ethan," Clara called, voice tight. Her fist gripped the torn canvas bag. He surged a few steps, and Camille swept out an arm, slow, controlling. "Enough. You've run long enough, Ward." Her tone was even, but the pressure in it forced a pause. Harbor wind pushed the taste of salt across the pier. Rain hammered the tin nearby like rolling drums. Ethan set his feet, muscles tight beneath his soaked suit, eyes locked on Camille. Cold water traced his spine. "What do you want?" he asked. "You know." Camille stepped closer. Her heel punched a puddle and flung cold drops into the air. "The drive. And Clara." Clara drew a sharp breath, eyes wide in the sweep of a headlight. Her hand loosened on the bag for a beat, then tightened. "What do I have to do with it?" "You're the key," Camille said, a thin smile cutting through the rain. "Without you, those files are just numbers. And I don't play meaningless games." Ethan leaned toward Clara in that sliver of distraction, but Camille saw it and smiled deeper, her gaze flashing a warning. "One more step, and she's gone before your eyes." The two men edged closer to Clara, rubber soles squeaking on the slick pavement. Clara looked around, her eyes sharpened, not with fear, but with decision. Her breathing quickened. A stiff gust whipped through, driving salt into their lungs. Ethan felt his pulse match the rain, each beat like a breaking wave. He knew he had one thin chance left. "Camille," he said, voice low, hands fisting. "If I hand you the drive, do we walk away?" She tilted her head, reading every small move. Rain beaded on her lashes and slid down her cheek. "Maybe. I decide once it's in my hand." Ethan's fingers drifted toward his inner pocket, slow under the rain. Camille's eyes narrowed. The two men stiffened. He didn't pull a hard drive. He drew a small silver USB gleaming under the washed-out lights. Camille let out a short laugh that mixed with the patter on the hood. That won't cut it. It's enough to cost you everything, Ethan said, voice sharp as the wind. He raised the USB higher. It holds video proving you staged the embezzlement. And if I don't check in within 30 minutes, it goes to every newsroom in the city. For a second, her face shifted. The smile froze, then reset. She wiped rain from her skin. You're betting big, Ward. No, he said, stepping in, steady as a rock in the storm. I'm ending this. Clara moved on instinct. She snapped an elbow into the man on her right, then dropped low and swept the other's leg. One hit the wet pavement with a heavy thud. The second staggered, arms windmilling for balance. Ethan lunged, caught Camille's wrist, and turned it hard. She stumbled. He flicked the USB to Clara with a clean, practiced motion. Take it and run. Clara caught it and tore for the dark harbor, never looking back. Camille's shout ripped across the rain. Stop her! But the storm and the drum of feet drowned the command. The men scrambled and slipped on the slick street. Ethan held Camille long enough to meet her eyes, both faces streaming water. The game's over, he said. Her mouth curved in a thin line. She whispered, just loud enough to cut through the wind. Over? Not yet, Ward. You just started the real storm. He shoved her away and sprinted after Clara. He rounded the last stack of containers and stopped cold. The pier ahead was empty. Clara was gone, swallowed by wind and rain. The rain had stopped, leaving the harbor slick and shining. Yellow lights scattered like fallen stars across the wet concrete. Clara Finch had vanished a moment ago, and Ethan Ward stood frozen, breath heavy with the sting of salt. At his feet, a silver USB lay on the damp ground. Its red light blinked like a last heartbeat, slowed, then went dark. Far down the rows of tall containers, a figure emerged. Clara. Wind tangled her hair. Her soaked jacket clung to her frame, but her hand still held the now dark USB. She walked toward him, slow, steady steps. The panic in her eyes was gone, replaced by a clear, new confidence, like night giving way to dawn. Ethan took a step, half ready to pull her close, half unsure it was truly over. His chest rose with worry and relief. You... Safe now, Clara said, cutting in. Her voice shook but held firm. She held out the USB. I broke the countdown code. No one controls it but us. Behind them, sirens cracked the damp air. Red and blue swept the pier. The lights caught Camille Royce in handcuffs between two officers. Her familiar half-smile stayed, but an empty shadow had opened in her eyes, as if the last mask had fallen. They walked her past Ethan and Clara, rain still clinging to her shoulders. At arm's length, Camille tilted her head and whispered, "Just for them, this match is over, but the board remains." Ethan didn't answer. He watched until the patrol cars pulled away and the glow faded behind stacked steel. A hard chapter clicked shut. His anger thinned, and a fragile calm took its place. By morning, Boston felt like it had shed a heavy fog. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows at Northbridge Dynamics and lit rows of humming desks. Every channel ran the story, proof of embezzlement and market manipulation, now public. Investigations widened. People once pushed aside by Camille and her circle stood straighter on the street. Her name disappeared from signs, contracts, and stray cafe talk, wiped clean like a stain. Ethan stood at the window of his new office. The early light softened the worry lines around his eyes. Below, Clara talked with a small group of staff, the ones who'd been sidelined and were now back, trusted and heard. Their laughter rose and blended with the hiss of the coffee machine. It made a simple, peaceful music he thought he'd forgotten. Clara walked in carrying 2 hot coffees. Steam curled in the warm air. She set one on the polished table, a playful spark in her eyes. "For you," she said, tapping the rim. "Don't tell me you can't enjoy the quiet." Ethan smiled, the guardedness gone. Heat spread through his palms as he lifted the cup. "I think I'm starting to remember this." They let the city sounds drift in, the hum of traffic, a bird call, a burst of laughter in the hall. They didn't need more words. Both knew this wasn't only about taking down an enemy. It was about finding faith again, in themselves and in each other. From the first whisper to the last reveal, they had turned unfairness into steady hope. That afternoon, they returned to the harbor, where it had started and in a way ended. Sunset painted the small waves gold. The scene from the stormy night flickered back, now calm like a still picture. Ethan took the silver USB from his pocket. He studied it one last time, metal glinting with hard memories, then threw it far into the water. A small streak fell and vanished among the ripples. Clara watched it sink. Her hand brushed his. Her voice was soft as a breeze. "So it's over." "No," Ethan said, eyes on the horizon as the sky reddened. "It's a beginning." They stood side by side, no more words needed. A salty wind lifted their hair, carrying the breath of freedom. Above, gulls tilted through the clouds, their calls a goodbye to the past and a welcome to what comes next. As the sun touched the water, Ethan understood. Sometimes to win back justice, you walk through the deepest dark. Then, in the light, even old wounds can become lasting strength. Morning light slipped through the trees along the Charles River, laying gold across the ripples. Ethan Ward stood quietly, hands wrapped around a hot cup of coffee. Beside him, Lena Morales let her hair fall loose, her eyes bright with simple joy after the storm. Just weeks ago, this spot had held uneasy whispers, doubts that ate at trust, and the shadow of betrayal by a friend of 15 years. Victor Hale and Camille Royce, who set the traps to seize Northbridge Dynamics, now faced consequences. During the online meeting, the truth landed hard. 2 versions of the contract, shady transfers, and recorded threats. The boardroom went still, then burst into overdue applause. Ethan turned to Lena, his voice warm. "That whisper, it saved more than me. It saved the whole organization." Lena smiled and touched his hand. "Worth isn't a job title. It's courage at the right time." Her sister, Elena, had come through heart surgery, paid for by an anonymous gift from Ethan. It was a quiet act of making amends, turning old pain into future hope. Northbridge Dynamics was more transparent than ever, with the Open Books Fund and a new internal whistleblower code, so every honest voice could be heard. No more injustices hiding in the dark. Through shocks and revelations, Ethan learned that justice isn't only punishment. It's restoring trust to people who lost it, like Lena, once a janitor falsely accused, now vice president for integrity. As for Victor and Camille, they did wrong, and they'll answer for it. But they're also a hard lesson in what unchecked greed does to people. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's choosing a brighter road forward. As the sun climbed higher, Ethan understood. Real justice appears when those with the least power stand up, and the world listens. Are you ready for your own whisper? That afternoon, they walked the harbor where it began, and in a way, ended. The water trembled under a golden sunset, echoing last night's tension, now calm as a painting. Ethan took the silver USB from his pocket, studied it once in the late light, then sent it sailing into the sea. The slight glint sank and vanished among the gentle waves. Lena watched it go and brushed his hand, her voice soft as a breeze. "So it's over." "No," Ethan said, eyes on the horizon, blushing red. "It's a beginning." They stood side by side without another word, the salty wind lifting their hair with the breath of freedom. Above them, gulls tilted through the clouds, their calls like farewells to the past, and a welcome to what comes next. And as the sun touched the water, Ethan knew this truth. To win back justice, you sometimes walk through the deepest dark, but in the light, even old wounds can become enduring strength.